And welcome back, y'all. This is Real with O'Neil. I am your host, O'Neil, and I'm sitting down with the prolific Stephanie Drenka. This is going to take a little bit. She is the co-founder and executive director of the Dallas Asian American Historical Society, a writer, a photographer, a public speaker, founder of Visible Magazine, and the earned media manager of Texas Civil Rights Project. Stephanie, how are you doing today?
Good. I'm good for it's Tuesday. Yeah.
Yeah,
Losing track of
I
time.
think it's a Tuesday. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, I appreciate it. No, thank you for sitting down with me, man. I really want to get right into it. The thing that really caught my eye and was something that really, it was interesting, man, because it's something that we don't really talk about a lot, especially in spaces for Black and Brown people. We got to talk about, of course, Asian Americans and what that means to be an Asian American, specifically in Dallas. So you are the co-founder of the Dallas Asian American Historical Society. What led you to form this group, and what's its purpose?
Okay, well, I'll go back kind of my origin
Yeah,
story
let's
to explain the trajectory. But I
okay,
was born in South Korea and adopted when I was 3 months old by a very sweet, kind Midwestern white family in Chicago.
love that.
And we moved to Marietta, Georgia, and I grew up mostly in South Lake, Texas. So
Okay,
I was used to being the only Asian American, not only in my school and my community, but even at home.
yeah,
I had very little information about my birth family and no access to Asian American history, Korean history, or my own culture growing up. And when I went to college, it was part of my intention to learn more about my roots. And I ended up minoring in Asian American studies while I was at DePaul University in
love that.
Chicago and just got really fascinated by all of the stories, not just about Asian American history, but specifically the intersectionality between our community and other marginalized groups. So, one of the stories that I always remember from my intro class to Asian American Studies was the Third World Liberation Front strikes and how different communities of color came together to advocate for ethnic studies
Mm,
on the West Coast and universities, and just seeing the power of that we have when we unite.
Rainbow
And
Coalition.
exactly, and
Come on now.
also the very intentional racial wedging and triangulation that happens to keep us divided so that certain people hold their
Yes.
power. All that to say, I loved that. I thought about going back to school, maybe becoming a professor, but ended up in the corporate
Hey,
communications, public relations space. So I majored in
it happens.
communications, minored in Asian American studies and women's and gender studies, kind of forgot about
Yeah.
the nonprofit dream and capitalism.
Yeah. I
So,
definitely get it. Let me
yeah.
tell you, I do nonprofit work, so I definitely get it.
So fast forward a little bit, I was back in Dallas, and this is actually kind of a tangent, but it's important. I was working in the fashion blogging industry. So I had a
Okay.
fashion and lifestyle blog, I did photography, and I was working for an influencer marketing company. At that time, I also met one of my best friends, Denise Johnson, who's a Filipina blogger. She was a fashion and beauty blogger at the time, and we just connected instantly.
Word.
I left the influencer marketing company shortly after Trump's first
Hmm.
term. I just got very frustrated with the silence and the apathy in the influencer community, and decided it was time to use my skills for good. And I went into nonprofits back in 2017
Okay.
and worked in various organizations. So I was the communications manager at Big Thought, and then eventually ended up as the communications director at Dallas Truth Racial Healing and Transformation
Got you.
with my mentor, Jerry Hawkins. And so that was I think the foundation for what eventually led me to start DOS is that about 3 years into my time at Dallas TRHT, it was COVID. It was after George Floyd's murder, and it was during the Stop Asian Hate movement
Yes.
reports, and specifically after the Atlanta area shootings, where the Korean spas were targeted.
Yes, ma'am.
And Dallas TRHT at the time was one of the only racial equity, racial justice organizations, you know, really speaking out in Dallas. I was the only Asian American on staff, and so suddenly we had people wanting to do panels about Asian American history and racism. And I would be sitting on panels in Dallas, and there would be, someone from the Chamber of Commerce,
Right.
someone from the police department, and me to talk about history. And I would look around, and ask myself, like, why aren't there any professors? Like, I was thinking of my time in Chicago with all these
Right, right,
experts.
right, right.
And so I started doing some research on my own, realized that there were no Asian American studies programs in Dallas proper and nearby universities, no professors that specialized in Asian American history. So I figured, okay, if I'm going to be the one to be speaking on this, I better do my due diligence. Tried to find sources and stories, could not find any. So
That's wild.
in my time at TRC, I was managing our social media. And during Women's History Month, I wanted to be really intentional about uplifting an Asian American story. So I looked in this book called Asian Texans for any Asian American woman with connections to Dallas.
Okay.
And I found this paragraph about a woman named Dr. Suzanne On, a Korean who was a neurosurgeon, activist, civil rights leader, and she was diagnosed with lung cancer at a pretty young age and donated $100,000 to the Asian American Journalists Association to make sure that more Asian American stories were told.
Love that.
I was so inspired by her story, I wanted to share it on her Instagram. The only picture that I could find of her was this black and white, really grainy photo from an obituary. I was like, well, that's all I have, so I'm going to share the story. And um, so it was March. We were doing an event where we had Miss Opal Lee on a panel in Fort Worth.
She's so sweet, man.
She's
She's so
incredible.
sweet. Yes.
And I'm sitting here and I'm listening to her and I was thinking about Dr. On and I was like, we never got to hear her story and her voice. Like the Asian American community doesn't have someone to look to for that guidance. And I just thought that it was such a loss. I couldn't sleep that night. So 3 o'clock in the morning, my mind is racing and I'm like, I have to start an Asian American Historical Society in Dallas,
I
you know?
just hey man, it just came to
Yeah.
it just came to
I
nah,
was,
I love that. I
inspired
love
by
it.
my friends at the Dallas
Yeah.
Mexican American Historical League,
Yes,
remembering Black
yes,
Dallas.
yes.
I just realized there was so much
It's
work to
critical
be
though.
done that it wouldn't work for me to stay in my role at TRHT and cover
Right.
everything.
Right, right, right.
So this is where the fashion blogging story crossover comes into play. Denise simultaneously she was kind of out of blogging at that point and was doing a video project where she was interviewing Asian Americans just on their experiences with racism and how they were coping during COVID. So I woke up that next morning, told her I'm going to start the Dallas Asian American Historical Society. Would you co-found it with me? And if you do, I will try to fundraise for your documentary project.
Right, right. Hey man, you scratch my back, scratch your yeah, I get it. I
So
get it.
she joined in. We found somebody to be our third board member. We talked to community members and we started the organization. And that was in April of 2022.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, it's so interesting to see that, different facets of your life. And maybe if you look at it, they don't seem like they cross over.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they do.
Yeah.
And then they all cross over. And then you create something that's beautiful. So, I want to go take a step back to really look at Dallas and how Asian Americans, specifically Dallas Asian Americans, how they interact with Dallas in particular. You said that the Dallas Racial Equity Plan timeline only referenced Asian Americans once, which is a little wild.
Yeah.
When you and Denise founded DAS in 2022, what does that omission tell you about the city views Asian American contributions, and how do you plan to change that? And I know you already have
Yeah.
essentially, but what kind of how was that process, and how do you view that when it comes from the perspective of the city?
I think, one of the startling things was it was specifically Asian or specifically women in Dallas who had like shaped Dallas's
Amen.
history.
Love that.
And so for me to think like this is the first instance of an Asian American woman contributing to the city, like that's not possible.
Can't be.
And so
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
that was a glaring omission. And so our purpose is to put Asian Americans back in the narrative, and that is like digging through archives, finding physical evidence that we were here, like the matchbooks that we've started collecting, and in those gaps, because our history has not been documented widely in textbooks, it's not taught. I'm filling in those voids by doing oral histories, doing a lot of community archiving work and digitizing and preserving family photos and stories and making sure that it is documented and available for future generations.
Mhm, mhm. That's amazing, man. I want to also kind of speak on because I'm trying to. You have so much going on, basically. And so I'm like, okay, so she did Dodge when it comes to, but talk about Matt. Hey,
Mhm.
so again, like
Okay.
off camera, we talked about how I lived in the South Side of Lamar, so I've been down there. I've seen Matt. It's beautiful. All the pieces are amazing. Tell me a little bit of the story about
Yeah.
that, and how why that's so important to the culture of Dallas.
Um, the Met is another, rabbit hole. So what
Love
year
it.
do you think the first, record of an Asian in Dallas was?
The first record.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that I, I want to say like early 1900s. I'm gonna throw out a year. I'm gonna say 1915. How about that?
Okay. Not too far off, 1873.
Okay.
So
Okay.
in 1873, the Dallas City Directory listed J.L. Chow, as like living and boarding in a space in Dallas. And then in 1874, he was listed as owning a laundromat, like a laundry. So J.L. Chow owned Chow Laundry. And
Okay.
so that's the earliest record, but it's also the first year that Dallas published a city directory. So it's as early
And
as we
uh,
have documentation. Again,
yes.
what's so
Yes.
important. So the early Chinese were railroad laborers. They built the railroad that connected Dallas to the rest of the country, essentially, and
Yeah.
made it possible to be this commercial center. But we get no recognition or credit. After the railroad was built, some of the Chinese men stayed and opened laundry businesses. And for a while, did really well. They were throughout downtown. At one point, 41 out of 49 laundries were owned by Chinese.
Wow.
But then, with the invention of the steam laundry, white laundromat owners
Yeah.
set up their buildings, started an association that put propaganda into the newspapers and warned people that if they brought their laundry to Chinese laundries, they ran the risk of contracting diseases.
Hmm.
Um,
I feel like that type of propaganda still affects Asian Americans today.
yeah, sounds
Sounds
familiar.
real familiar.
So they went out of business and they ended up starting restaurants. But I thought about that and, the laundries were in downtown. The JL Chow was listed where the Bank of America building is, where,
Oh wow.
it's like essential, quintessential Dallas.
Yeah.
And so I think about that and I was like, what would they have been able to build if they had the rights and the
Opportunity.
citizenship, the opportunity,
Mhm.
um the laws to bring their families and settle and make roots. And so it was kind of in the back of my co-founder and I's mind to reclaim the laundromat.
Yeah, yeah.
And we always talked about that. Like, let's find an old
I love that.
laundromat and
Yeah.
like turn it into a third space. Well, we got our space in Southside, and we opened it as just Dallas Asian American Historical Society. But I was working on just like updating our website, and I was like, you know what? It's really hard to talk about the space. Like, it's a community archive, it's a research library, it's a museum and an art gallery. I'm like, we need a shorter name. And so I was like, what about the mat? Like
Yeah,
reclaiming. And
yeah,
then I was
yeah.
like, okay, so let's make this work. Museum,
Yo!
archive. And so I was talking to my co-founder. I was like, museum, archive, what could the T be? And I was like, wait, Asian Texan, the Museum of Asian Texans, which then led me to think, let's expand the scope of the space to allow for Asian Texan stories, not limiting it to Dallas Fort Worth, because I looked and I had a lot of imposter syndrome about calling it a museum. And then I looked in the
It's a dope
institute.
ass museum, yo. Go check it out.
But we've got the Crow Museum, we have the Asia Society of Texas, we have different institutions focused on Asian art and culture, but all of them were founded by white people,
Mhm.
white men with fetishes for Asian culture and
Yes.
art,
Yes.
their personal collections, and they're doing good programming now, but it was not for us by us.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so I just decided like we might not be what people typically think of as a museum, but a museum is really just an institution where you preserve and showcase items of interest and value, and who determines what items are of value.
Yeah, for I just wanna say the mat is a sick name. That's tight. Yeah, and you connecting with laundromat and it having historical ties to Asian American businesses is beautiful. And I want to, and I represent, I identify as black. Of course, my family's black. Live in a black neighborhood
Mhm.
and stuff like that. And people need to realize, of course, that downtown is extremely diverse back in the day. I mean, it is, but the downtown used to be where you would find black and brown
Mhm.
businesses, Asian American business, Dallas Asian businesses, and then we're not really seeing it. It became corporatized all over the place, and we got
So
pushed out. No soul, and now we're actually seeing the effects of that. That no one wants to live downtown. I did a video on that. You can check it out on Instagram. But I want to. We're gonna take a little break. There's a lot to talk about. There was actually something I want to talk about City Hall, but we can do that later. But thank you for sticking around, y'all. This is Real with O'Neal. We're going to talk a little bit more about your backstory and kind of your artistic vision of certain things that you do. It's going to be really dope. Stay tuned, y'all. We had a real great conversation just about the contributions of Dallas Asian Americans and DOS, the museum mat that she, which tight name. I hope y'all were listening to why she chose that name for the museum. But let's go back into the contributions that you were discussing when it comes to Asian Americans here in Dallas. One of the most prolific and probably most famous, in my opinion, Asian American contributions in Dallas is City Hall. People don't realize that the main designer was a Chinese American named I.M. Pei that designed the Dallas City Hall back in, was it the 1980s, I believe?
Mhm.
It was 1970s. Um, we're seeing today a threat against that building by developers and unknown stakeholders that are wanting to erase a extremely historic and important third space here in Dallas. So I want to get your perspective, your insight on IMPay, his contribution, and the importance of maintaining this historical site here in Dallas.
Yeah, so IMPay, the building itself.
Right,
Let's we can just start there. The
right.
building itself as a historic landmark needs to be preserved, period.
Period.
Its status and purpose as the people's building, as the people's house, as a place that we can not only gather safely, build community, advocate for the things that we need, speak to our elected officials. I mean, that in itself, we
Yes,
must protect that at all costs.
yes,
I I defer to the architects and the traditional preservationists to speak to those elements. What I'm really focused on in my advocacy around it is preserving IMP's legacy. Because,
yes,
like
ma'am.
you said, um, there are so few contributions of Asian Americans in Dallas documented. And his example is something very tangible, something visible at this point.
Yes,
And his story is incredible, and too few people know about it. I did not know as much about it myself. To be honest, I don't spend that much time at City Hall until and I'll say this: I'm very introverted, so I prefer to write and to be kind of behind the scenes and not speaking at city council meetings. But in 2019, I did a fellowship with the Op-Ed Project called the Public Voices Fellowship, and um, it's essentially training underrepresented voices, to, uh, publish op-eds and build thought leadership, but
yes,
one
ma'am.
of the long-term goals is that you take public stands on things that matter, and they have a motto that says, "If you say things of consequence, there may be consequences. The alternative is to be inconsequential."
Ooh,
And
I love that.
and too often I would, think about, okay, if I go speak at City Hall, one, I might like fumble or make a
Eh,
fool out of myself. There might be people that disagree with me. There might be consequences to what I say, but this is my city and I don't
yes, ma'am.
want to have things happen without putting it on the record that somebody tried to fight for the right thing. And
Yes, ma'am.
especially as an Asian American with so few representatives that have, had the, I would say, moral courage to speak out on topics like Palestine, for
Yes,
example,
ma'am.
or against ICE. It's become really important. So as of recently, I've spent more time at City Hall, and the more I learn about IMP as an architect, as a human, the more I fall in love with the building, and I will continue fighting for it. I'll probably be out front when they
I,
bring the bulldozers.
Hey man, we're gonna stop them, bro. We're gonna stop 'em. And you're absolutely right.
Mhm,
This is I think another example of Asian American erasure.
mhm, absolutely.
And you providing this insight, not me personally,
Mhm,
not knowing the lack of documentation of Asian Americans and Asian Americans being here in Dallas
mhm.
since the conception of Dallas. And providing the labor for railroads and commerce to come even into the city, and then us not give the credit where credit is due is shameful and disrespectful.
And for people to say like, "Oh, I don't like the look of the building or it's old," when IMP literally designed the Louvre pyramid, like the JF Kennedy
Wait, run it back,
Library in Boston.
run it back.
You didn't know that?
No, I didn't know. He designed the
He's
Louvre, the
he
Louvre,
the pyramid. So, the museum, of course, was, like, built in,
yeah,
like,
yeah,
whatever,
right, right, right.
and they commissioned
Oh my god,
him to do something with to build the entrance because it was hard to navigate and no one knew how to get into the museum, and so
damn.
they commissioned him, the prime minister of France, to design the entrance, and he designed the pyramid, and what was interesting was that the French people were so mad that an American was hired to do this. They
To do
hated
something
the
dope.
idea of the pyramid. They were like, "This doesn't fit." A lot of the language that we hear about City Hall, about it being ugly, about it, like,
Yes.
sticking out, and he had this idea of, because people had only seen drawings of it. He wanted them to see the scale and what it would feel like to walk through it, and so he had, like, a full size, like, frame set up where it was gonna be, and when people really felt and understood the vision, they loved it, and now it's iconic.
Yeah, yeah.
And what's beautiful about his work is that he does so much research on the place and the history and the people and designs it not in his style, but to fit the need of that, particular time and moment and community. And he did that with City Hall. He was in the meetings for Goals for Dallas back in the 60s after the Kennedy assassination. He spent time talking to leaders, to the community, really understanding downtown and what the building would mean and what the people needed. And for everyone that thinks the design is ugly, it was very intentional.
Yeah,
Um,
brutalist is what they call
so
it.
brutalist, and people also think like, oh, brutalist, like it means like brutal or like mean.
Right, right, right. It's a
But
negative
no,
connotation.
but
Yeah, yeah.
it was based on like a French word, and it's more about the concrete. So he uses
Which makes
port.
sense. Yeah.
So he uses poured in concrete as, and I'm not an architect, so he
Mhm.
poured in concrete, which allows a more open space and for like the floor to ceiling window, like to bring all the
Yeah,
light
it's very
in.
airy. You
Exactly.
walk in, it's grand halls and things like that. It's
And,
beautiful in my opinion.
I've been doing research and reading watching interviews, reading transcripts of its oral history, and he talks about, he came back to Dallas several times, and he said when he went to City Hall, he would always go to the 2nd floor. That was the public space. And he said people would say, "Why did you spend so much money on this area? This is just where people go to pay taxes and pay their water bills." And he was like, "Exactly.
Yes.
This building is for the people. It was not for the mayor. It was not for the
I
council.
love that.
If it was for the people, and I want them when they come to pay their taxes to know that this was for them."
I love that, man. I love that. That's so critical. And when we're talking about, oppressed groups and communities and their contribution, we have to make sure that we understand that, this fight isn't over. And that it's shaped by all of our individual experiences coming just living through America and living through the racism that is, I'll be honest with you, at the core of a lot of American society. And so, I want to run it back just a little bit. And you provide a lot of visibility and space for oppressed communities. It's critical. You have a unique experience as an adoptee where visibility for foster kids, for example, is damn near non-existent. What about your personal experience has shaped the way that you do advocacy, and what misconceptions do you think the public has when it comes to adoption?
Well, this actually ties back to blogging too. So I was working at that influencer marketing company, and a lot of the bloggers that I worked with, and I was, there to provide strategy and help them optimize their website, were adoptive parents, like white
Wow.
Christian adoptive moms, and I would be looking at their site to check it for, work. And one day, this blogger, who shall remain nameless, she lives in Texas, she had adopted children from China,
Okay.
and she had a series called Orphan Sunday, on her blog, and she was sharing pictures and stories about her three-year-old daughter who could not give consent, talking about her medical conditions, her struggles to adapt to the language, just all of this information. And what killed me was that she was monetizing it because she was getting, you know, money for every page view, for the affiliate links she had in it, and she was profiting off of her child and exploiting. And
So there's a fetishization.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's like this savior complex, and
Yes.
there's all
Yes. Yes.
that would be
Yes.
a whole other podcast
Yeah. I was
about the
no
history
30
of
minutes.
adoption.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
all this to say, my specialty was search engine optimization. So I was searching for like adoption blog, and I would only see blogs from adoptive parents or from social workers or adoption agencies. And so I did a little work on my website and decided like I want to be optimized for adoption blog.
Yeah.
And I optimized pretty well. And I wrote a piece about why I was not going to celebrate National Adoption Month as an adoptee. That piece was
Okay.
seen by a HuffPost personal editor, and she asked me to repurpose it for an essay that was published in HuffPost.
Okay.
I went on to do that Public Voices Fellowship with the Op-Ed Project and published an additional piece. And what I learned in that fellowship, which to backtrack a little bit, the Op-Ed Project was founded because the founder, Katie Ornstein, um, had looked at a study that the Washington Post did. And um, at that time, most of the op-ed pages were filled with white men as
Yes.
the experts.
Right.
And Washington Post did a study that showed that um, actually it was based on who pitched. So they were getting more pitches from men and from white men. And there were all these questions about, how do we get more women's voices? And Katie decided, let's try getting more women to pitch. And so the op ed project is all about pitching. And so I went through the fellowship, but even with, these experts that I was surrounded with in the fellowship, they were being told by editors, like, if you're not like a CEO, if you don't have a PhD, we can't publish you. People weren't being seen as experts for their lived experiences. And that's something that I see very much. The adoptees have the most expertise because we live and
Yes.
breathe
Absolutely.
this.
Absolutely.
Our voices should always be the center, but we're not seen as experts because we don't have like
A degree
a
on the wall.
degree in it.
Hmm.
And so I created Visible Magazine for many purposes, for visibility for Asian Americans, people of color, young voices who are
Yes, ma'am.
told, they don't have enough life experience, and for adoptees. And that's been a really rewarding project for me.
I love that, man. Yeah, I love that. So I used to work at track, and the foster care system is abysmal
Mhm.
here in America. So you being able to provide this space for folks that have lived the same experience you is amazing. I appreciate that. I have a quote for you. That I thought it was tight. I think it was on your website, so I definitely had to get your insight on it. But Maya Angelou go. There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. That's beautiful. What do you think about that?
I've been thinking about that a lot lately. I mean, I'm 40 now, and I'm thinking a lot about what I'm going to leave behind
Yes, ma'am.
and legacy and passing on. And I think for me, the greatest gift that we can leave behind is our story and our experience, because not only does it show people and guide them and teach a history, stories help people realize that they're not alone.
Love that.
And so
Yes.
whenever I write something or I post something, I don't think about like how many people it's going to reach. I think about it might reach the one person who needs to hear it,
Yes,
like
ma'am.
the young Stephanie in South Lake Carroll who thought no one knew, what it was like to be the only Asian in a sea of blonde football players and cheerleaders. And if I can get my message to her, like
Yes.
I'll have done that. And to hold that story and not have that impact, the potential impact, not only unbearable for you, but unbearable for the person that needed
Yeah.
to hear it.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Now, Stephanie, thank you so much. We're gonna come right back, y'all. We're gonna talk a little bit about what inspires you. But this is Real with O'Neill. I'm your host, O'Neill. We'll be right back. I want to ask you a really basic, corny question that everybody asks people who are artists and whatnot. But who's your biggest inspiration and why?
I'll give my Asian American lens
Yeah. Yeah.
inspiration
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
because I know that we're kind of underrepresented in this space, and that would be Yuri Kochiyama and Grace Lee Boggs are both my activist heroes. not only for the advocacy that they did on behalf of the Asian American community, but the work that they did in tandem, especially with the Black community. So Yuri Kochiyama was a close friend of Malcolm X, for
Oh,
example.
tight.
And Grace Lee Boggs worked in Detroit alongside a lot of the civil rights leaders there, and always spoke about the need to take care of each other and to be part of a bigger community and make people feel like they belonged. And that's a lot of the work that I do in Asian American historical preservation, is not just to tell our history, but put it in the context of other communities so that we can not only see, the common oppression and patterns, but also see the power that we've had in history when we've collaborated and worked together.
I love that. I love that. Tell me, is there any projects coming up, man? What's on the horizon? What can my audience look forward to when it comes to Stephanie's the next big thing? You know
I
what I
think
mean?
the biggest new thing, and it's kind of a scary undertaking for me, is that I'm going to be co-authoring a book with my former boss and mentor, Jerry Lee Hawkins,
Hey,
published by Deep Vellum Books, coming out in fall
shouts out to Deep
2000.
Ellum. They're super tight.
Yes. So it's scheduled for fall, winter 2028, and it's going to be a people's history of Dallas.
I love that. I'm looking forward to it. Definitely want to read that. That's going to be tight. Definitely need to get a copy. Definitely need to get that signed copy. You know what I'm saying? One last thing. I want you to finish this sentence. From the river to the sea.
Palestine will be free.
All right. I love that. This is Real with O'Neil, y'all. I appreciate Stephanie for sitting down and talking about your past and talking about your projects and why it's so important that we look into Asian American contributions, because those contributions affect all of our lives even to this day. So thank you so much. I appreciate y'all. This is Real with O'Neil. Catch you later.